All right, I think we're gonna get going. Welcome everybody to Community Power Phase 2, our talk today. We passed our community choice aggregation community power laws back in 2019, so it's been quite the adventure over the last 4 years to get to a point where we're finally launching our first programs. I believe Community Power has launched a few of their towns, as has Standard Power, and then we've got some towns scheduled for Q1 of 2024. So looking forward to talking with our panelists today. We've got Don Eckert from Pioneer out in California. Don's going to be joining us virtually today. We've got Glenn Weinberg from Joule over in New York. And then we've got Mariel Marchand, from Cape Light Compact from our neighbors down in Massachusetts. So this is going to give us a good opportunity to get a flavor for how community power, community choice aggregation is done in the other states that have been active in this market for quite some time. So with that said, we're going to hand the mic over to our friend Glenn and let him kick us off today and give us a presentation. Each of the speakers is going to give us a quick presentation on their company, what they do in their states, and then afterwards get into some panel discussion and then open up to Q&A from the audience afterwards. So with that said, Glenn, you have the baton.
Thank you, and thanks for having us here, and good to see everybody. It's really pretty remarkable. I'm thinking, it's like this is the panel where, can you hear me okay? Okay, good. Closer, okay. It's pretty remarkable because we're sort of here as the veterans from other states to talk about all our battle scars, and the amount of enthusiasm and positive sort of and consensus around CCA or community power at the start in New Hampshire is really pretty remarkable. I was at this conference 2 years ago, and it wasn't even real then. And there was a similar amount of buzz, and there was a tremendous, I couldn't get over how many people were at a conference for something like this, so which is pretty narrow and specialized, and sort of prospectively, and now it's a very real program, of course. I learned today 14 municipalities already up and running, and so that's great. Just very, unique to see this kind of engagement this early on. Joule Assets, Joule Community Power, we are a CCA or community power consultant and program manager, primarily in New York State, moving into Illinois and maybe one day other states, including potentially New Hampshire. Today we serve, actually, we just signed another client this week, so it's now 57 clients in New York, nearly 1 million New Yorkers for their CCA, as their CCA administrator or program manager, including the city of Rochester and other large towns and cities throughout New York State. We're kind of a unique consultant for the CCA world in the sense that we are not energy brokers as our DNA. We're really a clean energy company. We really started doing demand response and energy efficiency and other clean energy programs. Really, Joule, the DNA of Joule is really about bringing access to smaller customers, access for smaller customers to renewable energy markets, products, and services, typically through the model of aggregation, of customer aggregation. So CCA is really natural bread and butter for us. We've been working in New York on CCA since, actually before it started. Our founder, Joule's founder, was really instrumental in bringing CCA, first legislation and then regulation, to New York State, which started with a pilot in Westchester County. I was the program director of that first pilot program in New York. I worked on that program for about 18 months before going to Joule to sort of work on the second generation of CCA programs throughout New York State, and now we have many active programs from the east end of Long Island all the way up to Lake Erie and pretty much everywhere in between. We work pretty comprehensively throughout New York State. And really, we're focused on clean energy for all. That's really Joule's mission. We've seen some very strong performance in our programs to date. In 2022, we saved customers $18 million. 2023 has been a flatter year because of energy prices, of course, but still very close to utility price to compare for our customers, delivering stability and access to in-state renewables. And now we're looking to really go beyond that kind of first customer value proposition of CCA, which is fixed rate, competitively sourced and procured access to renewable certificates, in-state renewable certificates, and we've really focused on innovation. So we're the first program to bring community solar to CCA customers on an opt-out or default enrollment basis. So just as electricity supply in most CCA programs is a default offering and replaces the utility basic service, in our programs, in these first pilot programs, community solar offering is also a default or opt-out enrollment product. And that's been extremely successful, saving customers up to 10% guaranteed on their electricity bill. We are now focused on the different sort of avenues of innovation, really in working more on the larger scale, a wholesale side of renewable procurement, and working PPAs and other virtual PPAs and other contract structures into our mix, into our CCA supply mix, as well as thinking more strategically and dynamically on the supply procurement side as well, and really thinking and moving beyond the sort of standard fully fixed rate model to a more strategic and dynamically managed product as well, similar to what the early programs in New Hampshire have as well. So just a couple, other sort of case study sort of first that we're working on. We're working now with our clients to self-develop, especially on brownfield and municipal sites on their own parcels, especially on brownfields. So we're working on a 5-megawatt landfill solar with a client on the east end of Long Island, the town of Southampton, and also on community storage programs within the CCA program. So in the city of Rochester, we're working with a nonprofit called the Open Door Mission to do a community storage project on their facility that will ultimately benefit the residents, the low-income residents of the city of Rochester, with guaranteed savings through the community storage credit. So those are two examples of sort of some case study small projects that we're working on to sort of demonstrate proof of concept of some innovative models that could work within the CCA construct. And then finally, before I hand the baton, I just want to kind of give high level. I know this panel will really be about kind of the lessons learned from other markets and other experiences, and how New Hampshire can sort of make use of those lessons learned, being at an earlier stage of maturity of market development. So I just sort of give three basics, and then we can kind of dig in. First is really thinking about building for flexibility early. I think I was guilty of in program design early on saying, hey, we really want to nail this down, right? We don't want to leave a whole lot open. We really want to have this figured out. We want to write it down. We want to codify it. And we want to make sure that we have a real clear direction with goals, with very specific goals and tools that we intend to use. And then, of course, what you find 2, 3, 5 years later is you wish you would have been a little bit more open here, a little more flexible here, left a little bit more room to sort of explore other models there. So I think the first thing is, don't be afraid to build for flexibility and really think about kind of a range of possibilities from the outset and not get too, be a prisoner of sort of the one clear vision, although that's a tempting thing to chase. I think time has a way of erasing all those plans, right? So first is sort of build for flexibility. Second is really just more of like a reminder that genuine customer choice in retail energy markets is still very much the frontier, right? Even with all of this development and CCA programs and other products and services being offered at the residential level, real choice and real product diversity and a real true retail market is still very much not a full reality in most markets, including New York, the market that I'm most familiar with. So keep looking towards that as you know, the primary goal here. There's a lot of objectives. There's a lot of things that CCA and the community power model can accomplish. But genuine consumer choice and really making a market where there was none is still very much job one. And then, you know, the integration, we have spent so much time and effort at my company over the last 8+ years thinking about how to more fully integrate DER and large-scale renewables into our CCA product mix, right? And it's a lot of, sometimes you run through down those roads and it ends up being a dead end after 18 months of work or something. But the one thing I can say is that it is worth the pain to keep doing that, because when you actually get all the way through those development cycles and have a product that you can offer your customers, your CCA customers, that is a meaningful, represents meaningful progress in access to renewable energy, it's a game changer, right? So again, put that at the top of the list and don't get discouraged. That's what I'm sort of telling you, as if something I would tell myself from 5-7 years ago. Don't get discouraged by the sort of short-term failures. The long-term success is worth the pain. So with that, I'll hand over the mic, and thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Glenn. Next up, we have Mariel Marchand from Cape Light Compact.
Thank you. Do you mind? I'm just going to see if I can do this. Can you all hear me okay? So thanks. My name is Mariel Marchand. I am the power supply planner at Cape Light Compact. The Cape Light Compact is a municipal aggregator. Thanks. So Cape Light Compact is the municipal aggregator operating on Cape Cod in Massachusetts. The compact is a public body. It was founded in 1997, and it's governed by a board of public officials who were appointed by each of our member municipalities. And those member municipalities are the 21 towns on Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard. The compact reorganized as a joint powers entity in 2017, and we were the first municipal aggregator in the United States. We're the first joint powers entity in Massachusetts, and we're the only non-utility energy efficiency program administrator operating in Massachusetts. So the compact really does three main things, two of which I'm going to dig into. We offer a power supply product, and we run the energy efficiency programs, as I said. We also do consumer advocacy, so advocating for the interests of our ratepayers at the state level. Generally, that entails participating in dockets at the Department of Public Utilities, or advocating for legislation to help advance the interests of our ratepayers. I keep forgetting to do this. So I'm going to start with a quick overview of our power supply program. So the compact goes out to bid and negotiates a competitive electric supply agreement to provide a power supply product to our customers. We serve about 145,000 customers on the Cape and Vineyard. Our product offers competitive terms and conditions and strong consumer protections for our customers. Our customers can opt out at any time. And our rate changes every 6 months, which is somewhat different from what the other aggregators in Massachusetts are doing, and there are about 168 municipal aggregators currently operating in Massachusetts. Our pricing strategy mirrors that of basic service. The desire of our board, what they felt the constituents on the Cape and Vineyard wanted was a price that was close to market and competitive with basic service. And so our rate changes every 6 months in line with those basic service rate changes. Our power supply product includes 3 different products. We have a standard offering and then 2 local green offerings. So our standard product is 100% renewable. We get to 100% renewable by matching our customers' usage with voluntary national renewable energy credits. So those renewable energy credits are generated outside of New England. They're not Class 1. But they are Earth Error RECs, which essentially means that they're being deposited into a trust that is then reinvested in new renewable development in New England to the extent possible. Our standard offering also does match our customers' usage with an additional 1% of Class 1 renewable energy credits. And then we have 2 local green options, Local Green 50 and Local Green 100. Those are matching our customers' usage with Class 1 RECs, so RECs that are generated within New England. Those, of course, are more expensive RECs to purchase than those national RECs, and so that product does come at a premium. To this point, we launched that product in 2017, 2018. We've had relatively low interest compared to our standard product in that offering. And then finally, we are doing some more unique things with our power supply product. We have a PPA with Farmington Solar, which is a 65 megawatt solar facility located in Farmington, Maine. We are receiving 5 megawatts from that project, so energy and RECs at a fixed price for 20 years. So that energy is being scheduled into our account at the ISO and retired against our load. We also have signed a MOU with Commonwealth Wind to work in good faith to negotiate a PPA for energy and RECs from the wind that's being developed off the coast of the vineyard. So we're excited by the prospects of being able to fold in some of that wind that's coming ashore on the Cape into our power supply product. And so that was a brief overview of our power supply product. Through our energy efficiency programs, we're serving all 208,000 customers that live on the Cape in the vineyard. And our energy efficiency programs are really, I'd say, what's unique about the compact. So I'm going to start by explaining why a municipal aggregation in Massachusetts is able to run the energy efficiency programs. Normally in Massachusetts, those energy efficiency programs are run by the utility companies that are operating. It's a fully adjudicated process where the utilities or the program administrators submit 3-year plans to the Department of Public Utilities for approval. The compact is one of those program administrators filing a 3-year plan with the DPU for approval and operating the Mass Safe program is what it's called in Massachusetts alongside the utilities. And so we're able to do this because the 1997 Electric Restructuring Act that passed in Massachusetts included the municipal aggregation statute. The compact worked closely with our legislative delegation in the drafting of that legislation with the intent of essentially being able to ensure that funds that were being invested in the energy efficiency programs by ratepayers off their bills would be reinvested in Cape and Vineyard energy efficiency programs as opposed to being potentially spent over the bridge. And so that legislation has 2 parts. Part A is the municipal aggregation statute. That is what allows us to operate a power supply program. And then Part B is the part that enables municipalities the authority to adopt an energy plan. And the legislation specifically allows for municipalities to propose plans that are more specific, detailed, or comprehensive than any statewide conservation goal. And so we believe that that legislation allows us the flexibility to offer a program that's potentially a little bit different than what the utility program administrators are offering. Because our board is representative of the town, they understand the needs of the constituents, and so we can design those products to meet the needs of the constituents who live on the Cape and Vineyard. So the energy efficiency programs are funded through a charge on the electric bill, as you can see down at the bottom there. And the fact that we're running the program essentially ensures that those funds are reinvested on the Cape. And so very quickly, just to kind of run through what we offer for energy efficiency programs, we have residential programs, which are for our market rate customers. These include home energy assessments, a whole host of residential rebates, and then a heat loan, which is the 0 interest loan for efficient home energy improvements. We offer commercial programs, which are for businesses and nonprofits. They can sign up for a home energy assessment and take advantage of a number of rebates and incentives on energy efficiency upgrades. We're also running the Connected Solutions program, which Jennifer mentioned in her keynote address. So if you're on the Cape and the Vineyard and you're enrolling in Connected Solutions, the Cape Light Compact is running that program as opposed to the utility. Essentially, the compact is calling peak demand events based on forecasted regional system load. And there are three main buckets of that Connected Solution program. There's a residential thermostat program where customers with a Wi-Fi enabled thermostat connected to air conditioning, central air conditioning, can enroll, participate in events, and receive a gift card. There's a residential battery program where batteries enroll and receive incentives for participating. And then we also have a commercial program where the compact is actually working with a curtailment service provider to help facilities figure out what kind of demand response measures would be best to meet their needs. We also are offering income eligible programs. So these are for customers that are 60% or less of state median income, or enhanced residential, which are our moderate income customers, 60 to 80% of SMI. These programs essentially include larger incentives for the same measures covered under our residential programs to make those measures more affordable for customers that qualify based on income. Something that's unique about the compact running these programs is that we do our income verification in-house. So we have customers that come into our office with their tax returns or whatever income verification documentation they have in order to get verified for these programs. And our programs are really run as a one-stop shopping. We pride ourselves on having seamless enrollment for customers, so when they call for a home energy assessment, they're enrolled in all of the possible incentives that they could be. And then the last thing that I'm going to talk about is the Compact's Cape and Vineyard Electrification Offering, or CVEO, which is a pilot program that we are funding through our energy efficiency program. We're just in the process of rolling it out now, but it's really intended to be a complete decarbonization project for 100 single-family homes for customers on the Cape and the Vineyard who are low or moderate income. So that includes weatherization, the installation of heat pumps, solar PV, batteries for a portion of the customers, and electric stoves. And so why would we propose CVEO and run CVEO through our energy efficiency programs? We have found that it's often difficult for low and moderate income customers to take advantage of solar, heat pumps, and battery energy storage, mainly due to the high upfront costs associated with those technologies. We're also seeing customers when they're installing heat pumps, in Massachusetts at least, it's less expensive to heat with natural gas than it is with a heat pump. So without the solar, we're really increasing the energy burden on those customers. So there's a need to install solar when we're installing heat pumps for low-income customers. And so this program includes pretty steep incentives. This is only for customers who have electric resistance, propane, or oil heat. And 80 participants must be in deed-restricted homes based on affordability or income. And those customers are going to receive 100% incentives for the solar, the solar, the heat pump, and the battery. And then an additional 20 participants who are moderate income, so 61 to 80% SMI or AMI, will receive incentives, not the full 100%, but still pretty strong incentives for installing those technologies. And so that's all I had. Excited to be here and answer questions.
Sorry. All right. Well, we'll hold off on questions for everybody until after we get through the panel discussion. But thank you very much, Mariel. And now we'll move to Don Eckert, who is online with us today. I don't know if Don, if you can take over the screen, or Meg, you need help to do that.
Great. No, if you guys don't mind moving the slides along, that'd be great.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, hold on one second, just passing the mouse over. Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, perfect, thank you. All right, well, good morning, everyone. My apologies for not being there in person. Last night, we actually celebrated our 5-year anniversary of Pioneer, and then we had the celebration after the celebration. So hopefully I'm articulate this morning. And again, thank you for letting me be here today. It sounds like there's a lot of excitement and going on in New Hampshire, and glad to be part of this. So whenever you guys are ready, I'll go to slide number 2.
Yeah, why don't we take a couple questions while we're waiting?
Mariel, how did you get 21 towns to work together? It would be an impossibility in Carroll County. We have 19 towns.
That is a really good question, and admittedly, I was 7 years old when the compact was founded. So, but I know my boss and a group of folks working at Barnstable County at the time were we're at town meetings for every single town. I think we had like half the towns sign on in the first year, and the other towns in the vineyard sign on in the second year. And I know that it just took a lot of work being at town meetings, presenting, trying to explain why competitive markets would be beneficial for customers and why aggregating made sense. And I think being on the Cape, you kind of have the canal, which separates us from the rest of Massachusetts. And so I think there is a little bit to be said for being able to say that like that money that's being invested will stay on the Cape and not go over the bridge. I think that is potentially a reason for all the towns on the Cape to work together.
I was going to follow up. Are all the towns kind of politically, socially, economically similar? I don't know what the Cape is like.
Not necessarily, no. We have a couple towns that have a much larger year-round population, and then we have a number of towns that have a really small year-round population and really small population. And the vineyard is obviously different from the towns on the Cape, but I think that it is sometimes challenging, but we've been able to make it work.
Yes, please.
I was surprised to see that you have little interest in the greener options. I don't know if you were surprised, but how little is little?
So unfortunately, how little is little is we're serving about 145,000 customers with our power supply product. We only have about 150 customers who are enrolled in those local green options. And I think
what's the price delta?
It's 1.8 cents for the 50% and 3.6 cents for the 100%. And we did have a marketing campaign that we were in the process of launching, and then the electric markets really went crazy. And prices are so high at this point to begin with. Our supply rate is 14 cents right now. Asking customers to pay more when they're already experiencing sticker shock when they receive their electric bill has been challenging, and I think that has definitely contributed.
All right, well, thank you very much. We'll take some more questions at the end. We finally got to our IT issues, looks like, resolved. So, Don, you are ready to go and you're live for this packed house here.
So on the next slide, how it all started, I can't see the slides from where I'm at on your screen there, but basically this all started back in the late 1990s, early 2000s. So for those of you old enough to remember, California opened up the market to deregulate electricity. It was a disaster. A great documentary you can see is The Smartest Guys in the Room, which is what Enron did to California in the late 1990s. And Gray Davis was the governor at the time, and he really got recalled because of that crisis. And then Arnold Schwarzenegger took over, and he had that famous line of, "Gray Davis, you've been terminated." And you would think at the end of that, that's the end of competition in California. But it was not the case. So about 2 years later, Assembly Bill 117 was passed that allowed local communities to procure energy on behalf of their citizens. And that really opened the door for CCAs. The first CCA to launch was in 2010. So the legislation passed in 2002, and it took a full, thank you for putting the screen up there. And it took a full 8 years for the first CCA to launch. That was in Marin County. It's now called MCE Energy because it encompasses other counties through expansion. But back in 2010, it started off in Marin County. And for those of you that don't know where that is, so you see the Golden Gate Bridge. On one side of it's San Francisco, and the other side of it's Marin County. They were able to pull it off because they had the wealth there to provide the working capital to make this happen. But they faced severe public relations attacks from Pacific Gas and Electric at the time. through newspaper and radio and any other channel you can think of, TV as well, where they were attacked from PG&E pretty viciously, to the point where the CPUC stepped in and made that kind of behavior not allowed, and has helped all of us. So Marin, in a lot of ways, took the bullets for us for many CCAs to be able to launch. A decade later, it's been wildly successful. So now we currently have 25 operational CCAs in the state. We serve over 200 communities. 14 million people get their generation from CCAs. And very proud to say that CCAs are part of 11,000 new megawatts through power purchase agreements of renewable energy projects that wouldn't have happened without the CCA. So we're very proud of that. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this would be a map of the current CCAs that we have. And you know what I find interesting here, and the red arrows would be where we are, Pioneer Community Energy, is if you look at the state right from north of Eureka, where Redwood Coast is, all the way down to San Diego, it's CCAs. But the middle of the state has been largely left out of this revolution. And, you know, there's been equity issues that have been brought up with CCAs here in the state, certainly from the PUC as well, that all the focus is on green energy, and it's on the more densely populated portions of the state, which is along the coast, and the inland part of the state has been forgotten. I think what we're very proud of here at Pioneer and our board is that we're able to reach out to communities that are in the Sierra Nevadas and near there in the inland part of the state, even Central Valley, to be able to offer CCA expansion, because they may not be able to pull it off on their own. So they don't maybe have the population that would support launching a CCA. I heard a lady before this talk about pricing. It's a big deal here as well. And I think it's much harder the barriers to entry right now are much more difficult to start a CCA than they were 5 years ago. And so the really only option is to join a CCA. But inland state is going to be more worried about pricing as opposed to being green energy. And I think I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, where Pioneer kind of fits both sides of that with pricing as well as green. Next slide, please. I think you're all probably pretty familiar with the CCA business model. I assume that's going to be close to what you're seeing here. So for us here in California, it's going to, what we had on the left would be what folks had before CCAs, which is pretty much the vertically integrated utility, where that's the business model I'm used to for most of my career. And then what changes with the CCA is we start taking over the electrons, but the poles and the wires stay with PG&E. We can provide customer service, but if the lights go out or someone's needs an addition and a new line established, they're going to go through PG&E. So really, customers will be getting attention from both the CCA and PG&E. And then our billing works in that we have line items on the PG&E bill. CPUC set it up that way to basically, we're not administratively handling our own bills and sending out a separate bill to customers. It's part of the PG&E bill. Next slide, please. And I won't go through all these statistics. That would be horribly boring, but just a little bit about Pioneer. First of all, on the first table, second item would be the power supply percentage of budget. So how we stay competitive is about 92% of my budget is power supply. I have very little legacy cost. We keep our admin and general expenses very competitive. So we feel very strongly that even if prices are moving up on power supply, it will put pressure on our rates, but also at the same time, we're able to compete with PG&E because they're in the same arena as we are as far as purchasing power, but they have a lot other cost in their generation rate that we don't have. We also established about $2 million this year in programs budget. I bring that up because I think as you launch you don't want to be too aggressive with programs, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So we try to keep our programs right now to about 1% of our operating revenues until we receive our credit rating, which we hope to do at the end of this year. Also, just talk about expense coverage days. At one point we were down to about 40 days of expense coverage, and we implemented some financial policies that impacts rates. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but we're in a much better place than where we were. On the second table, I just want to point out the participation rate. You would think that if we're cheaper than PG&E and we're a choice to PG&E, and that many people here in our territory, especially because of the wildfires or the fires that were caused by PG&E in our area, are very much anti-PG&E. So you would say, well, why don't we have 100% participation rate? Why are people making economically insane decisions, if you will? Really, a couple of reasons. The main reason, I'd say 80% of why we have someone opt out is because of automatic enrollment. And so something to keep in mind as you launch your own CCA is if you have that same mechanism in place of automatic enrollment, get out in front of that issue early. So we have an expansion coming up with Nevada City and Grass Valley over in Nevada County. And we started tackling that issue about 7-8 months ahead of time before launch. I think it's been very much more well received, where we talk about why we have automatic enrollment. We keep emphasizing choice, and it really takes repetition of those messages to make that happen. And I'd say the other component of opt-outs would be next door. I don't know if any of you have to deal with that, but someone will get online on Nextdoor and they'll say Pioneer Energy owns oil wells. They're not into green energy. Well, there is a Pioneer Energy in Texas, and sure thing, someone hears that from their neighbor. No matter what you say, they'll believe their neighbor versus you because they don't know you. And so it just takes a lot of marketing and communication out there. But the next doors can do some damage if you don't monitor that. I talked about our discount to PG&E, and then also solar meters. So we have out of about 175,000 accounts, almost a quarter of them are net energy metering customers. And I'll just give you all some advice there that as you launch, if you have a large portion of NEMs in your territory, plan on your customer service team spending about 85% of their time on 25% of your customers in our case. They're the ones that have the most questions. They're the ones that will be most critical. The folks that invested into the NEMs, into their system, they are going to be your energy nerds, if you will, that really examine their bill. To bring them on board, to get that group on our side, what we've been able to do is offer a 0.5-cent premium over PG&E for those that overproduce, and we go through an annual true-up. But that's a very sensitive group, and even though they're a quarter of our ratepayers, they can impact the other 75% very much so. And then on the last table, I just mentioned our hedge horizon. So we have a 5-year laddering strategy. We've seen a tremendous uptick in power supply prices as well as resource adequacy in the last 12 to 18 months. And it looks like it's going to be around for a little while. That hedging program that you have in place really can absorb those shocks in the short term. It allows you to not have to knee-jerk reaction to rates. And then when you do have to raise rates, because you have a hedging program that you're buying power 5 years out, those rate increases don't have to be so severe. Next slide, please. So at Pioneer, we do have two choices. We show this slide to many of our ratepayers, and it's on our website as well, to show the difference between the two products as well as our comparison to PG&E. So our standard product is going to be a little bit above the state minimum. And so the state right now is every year, all load serving entities move up a little bit towards the 60% goal by 2030. And the state is looking at 100% green grid by 2045. So every year it moves up. So right now the minimum is around 42% and we're at 44. So just a little bit more than the minimum. But the advantage here is that it allows us to be cost competitive. And on average, a household's going to save about $220 a year with Pioneer. However, for many of our corporations in our territory and the Targets and the Walmarts, they have corporate directives to get to be Green 100 or 100% renewable product. PG&E right now does not offer that. They've closed that program, and so we can fill that void. And so for those who do want to be Green 100, we offer that product as well, and it's still competitive with PG&E. But I think what this does is that if you're launching your own CCA and you're dealing with cost pressures, you can offer one product that's less green and another product for those who want to be 100% green, and you can kind of fill both needs at the same time. Next slide, please. And I'll just kind of give you our kind of 5-year progression. And I think the point out of this slide for me is that you don't have to jump in on year one and, wow, we just got rid of the big bad IOU and let's go ahead and go crazy. You don't have to do that. You should go in this with the idea that you're in this for the long haul. You want to be around for 50 years. Most startups, I'd say 50% of startups don't make the first 5 years. So go into this thinking that this is a 25, 50-year, 100-year agency and start off slow, get the basics right, and then get to the point where you want to jump into to the programs and be more aggressive in your portfolio. But, for us, year one, even year two was about launching. We went through some transition where the previous CEO had retired, and there was kind of a holding period for that time. But by year three, we're already looking at expansion, where essentially we doubled our size. And that took a lot of time. It took a lot of time on the marketing side, customer care side, as well as just education with our board, as well as the new folks that we were bringing on board. Then by year four, we got into foundation, which I think should have been really more year two, but we had some delays that were understandable. But that's where we got into financial policies, establishing a strategic plan, and just getting the foundation of the business in place to be where we are today, where we have a board that fully understands now what a CCA can provide, and they're on board with it. We're able to launch programs much more aggressively this year. We're looking to obtain a credit rating, and we just actually engaged with Goldman Sachs on a prepaid deal. It's been really successful for us. And we have now cities and counties around us that are approaching us wanting to be part of this. So give yourself the time. Don't jump in year one thinking, you got to fix everything. Next slide, please. So lessons learned. This is certainly not an exhaustive list. There's many other things that we could add to this. But I would say if in your first year, develop a strategic plan. We wait till about the third year to do that. And I think for us, what's really important is, that there's the obvious, which is that becomes your North Star, developing your mission and your vision statement. But specifically for me, in my role with working with the board, is that when you talk to them one-on-one, and I've got 11 board members, each one is going to have a different idea of what they want out of their CCA. So when you go through the strategic planning process, what you do is you formalize that to getting a consensus from the board of what they want. And that then provides you clear direction of what you should be doing, as opposed to you think you're doing what they want. This gets us in writing to figure out what exactly they do want. I've also added priorities and then goals under those priorities to the plan, so that every time we're doing a staff report, if the staff can't tie out a recommendation to the board to something in the strategic plan, we got to really ask ourselves, why are we taking this to the board? So it puts also a discipline to the staff as well. This doesn't sound, as exciting, but adopting financial policies are absolutely critical. So what I found out early on with Pioneer is you got to take the politics out of rate setting. And so by putting financial policies in place that requires rate action when you fall below a minimum, let's say, cash coverage level, it takes some of you're never going to get the politics completely out of rate setting, but it takes some of it out of it, because then they can say, well, I'm just following policy, they being your elected officials. They don't have to make this as political as with having no guidance at all. And I went through a good 3-month process with the board on adopting these policies to set a goal of 160 days of cash on hand, but also explaining that that's not some number we picked out of the air, going through the process of explaining why that number is what it is. And they're on board now. And so we've had 2 excellent years of rate setting conversations and action that's puts us in a place to get a credit rating. So don't forget about, you got to pay the bills. Invest in public outreach. So I came from the traditional environment where if you're a utility, you want to stay out of the paper, right? And you're only going to get in there because either the bill got high or the lights went out. Well, in the CCA world, your customers have a choice. And so, next door to us is Roseville Electric. They're a municipal utility. We don't compete with other public power utilities, only IOUs. But they're next door. If they raise rates, someone has to move out of Roseville. Over here, someone only has to spend 60 seconds and they can opt out. So even though I have a defined service territory, I don't have a captive customer base. So don't forget to invest in the public outreach. I had about a $500,000 marketing budget when I first started. It's closer to $2 million, but it's well worth it. You got to be out there in the community and keep reminding people that this is a good choice for them. And then last on this list would be obtain a credit rating. So I early on, I was spending probably 30% of my PPA negotiation time on credit. Once we get a credit rating, I think we'll get that down to about 5% of really what the conversation is about. And right now I'm in a situation where power suppliers have a choice because prices are high. They're going to go to the CCA with a credit rating versus one that doesn't. So getting one opens up your options, and I think will give you better pricing. Next slide, please. And I won't go through all these relationships, but obviously the board is going to be tops. If you don't have them on understanding what you're trying to do, you won't move forward. Data management, this is super important. And I think Calpine Energy Solutions is probably at your conference. We work with them and they've been a wonderful partner for us. They really become your cash register. So data management is super important. The bank, develop relationships with the bank. So we use ours for our line of credit. They also handle our deposits, and that relationship, keep those folks on your side. Obviously, our employees. We have 18 employees managing a $240 million budget. Everybody is important here. So we do annual surveys to see what they want in benefits, and don't forget about them. And then your power suppliers. Those relationships are key. So we're short, let's say, on resource adequacy. Those relationships come in and say, yeah, we'll figure out something to do here and get a deal done to keep us compliant on resource adequacy or get us a better deal than if we didn't have those relationships. So those are really important. And then your trade association. We have CalCCA, who brings together 25 operational CCAs for us to build relationships with. Most of the time, somebody's already dealt with an issue before I have. What that trade association does is gives me this opportunity to build relationships with other CCA CEOs and talk out issues without feeling like you're on your own. And they also are very important in dealing with the CPUC or on the legislative side, where it's 25 CCAs backing them as opposed to each one doing our own thing. Next slide, please.
Don, we've got about 20 minutes left, so I just want to leave some time for Q&A from the audience and just to ask some questions of the panel. So,
thank you. That's the last slide, and I'm good. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, all three of you, for those presentations. Obviously, we're very new in New Hampshire to community power and community choice aggregation. But one thing that is a constant between New Hampshire, Massachusetts, New York, California is the fact that we all have to work in kind of a strange bedfellow situation with our local utilities for implementations of our plans. So I'm curious to see what challenges you might have faced, what the relationship is between your programs and the utilities, both early on and from a continuing production standpoint. So we'll start with Glenn in New York.
Yeah. So it's a consistent. Of course, is this on? Oh, sure. Switch. Yeah. So it's a consistent task to work with utilities. It's especially around data provision. That's something that, of course, utilities are very sensitive about. Customer information, account level data, anything that's deemed personally identifiable or confidential utility data is taken very seriously. There's all sorts of agreements and regulations around how that's treated. So anytime you're asking them for large amounts of big data sets of customer information, and especially for the first time, in other words, they're not used to, in the first few years of working with CCAs, the utilities are not used to pulling that data. So they may not know how, and we've seen that consistently, that it's a learning curve just to be able to query their system properly to get the right output. And that usually takes a few whacks at it. And then in an ongoing manner to make sure that there's a sort of smooth communication. So, Don's exactly right. The relationships with those utility people, the systems are important because at least with our utilities, they're old systems, they're legacy systems. They don't do this sort of, quick and sophisticated type of analysis and report pulling that maybe you would expect from a large company. So they're often telling us, hey, you got to bear with us here. Our system's 50 years old, or we can't do this. Or if we wanted to do that, it's going to take us a year to try to figure that out. So it's a lot of problem solving, especially early on kind of how to make their system work within the construct of what they've been asked to do, right? And now been told to do by a state legislation and or regulation. So just that kind of, especially that early stage, I guess I'll spotlight that early stage development, relationship building with the utilities to make sure there's trust back and forth that the CCA is not looking to do anything more than what they're allowed to do, anything nefarious, anything more than what the sort of standard customer enrollment and customer management that they've been permitted to do and have the authority to do. And once that relationship between the people is established, the ball flows a little bit downhill more easily.
Yeah, and I think mine would have been very similar. Definitely data access challenges with the utility. Something that Glenn didn't mention is just trying to get customer email addresses so that we can email our customers our marketing, as opposed to having to put something in the mail, which is expensive and often gets discarded as junk mail. We don't have the ability to email our customers to update them on price changes and anything like that. And that is certainly challenging. We finally will be getting advanced metering in Massachusetts on Cape Cod, probably 2027 is when it seems like we're already starting discussions with the utility about how we're going to be able to access that AMI data. That data will obviously be important for us to be able to offer time varying rates. In addition to running our energy efficiency programs, the other PAs are, they own those meters, that data, they'll have it. We're going to need to be able to access that data in order to run and then evaluate the effectiveness of our energy efficiency programs. So that's something looking forward that we're definitely going to be dealing with.
Okay, thank you. Don?
Yeah, thank you. And apologies for going over on my presentation, but yeah, it's taken us about 15 years to really get to the point where we got that relationship with the IOUs and the CCAs over here. But we meet weekly with our PG&E rep to go over issues, and for the most part, I think that's been really helpful. And but for what everyone else has talked about, we deal with the same issues. For instance, getting information on the bill correctly, they'll come back with, we need at least 6 months lead time to be able to make those changes because it's an archaic system, and all kinds of back and forth like that, or getting transparency in the exit fees with the PCIA. But just meeting with them weekly, I have to look at PG&E as they're our competitor, but they're also our partner. And if you take that perspective, it will help. So thank you.
Okay. And just a quick follow-up on that. Some of the opposition that we heard at the legislature when we were looking at passing these laws in 2019 is the impact that community choice aggregation would have on standard offer service. Now that you're in more mature markets, could each of you speak to what impact, if any, the provision of standard offer has had vis-a-vis the opening of a community choice aggregation marketplace?
So in Massachusetts currently, I know that there is a basic service docket to look at the rising basic service costs. And one of the things that the utilities are pointing to is the aggregations and the risk associated with customers coming and going, potentially with higher market prices. It's possible that an aggregation could just kind of not re-up their contract and dump all of those customers back onto the standard offer. I don't think that's something that we've really seen happen very frequently, but that is something that the utilities are concerned about as they're procuring their power. So I know that is a standard offer issue. Beyond that, I don't really know of any other issues.
Tom, do you want me to? Yeah, so in New York, we have decoupled revenues for utilities. So really all of their return is on the delivery, the T&D side, which of course, their revenues stay flat even with CCA adoption. But of course, there's anxiety, about that issue as to how will that shift costs. And depending on how the utilities are hedged at any given moment, there could be an impact of certainly of a large number of customers sort of moving off. There is a pretty long runway, though, I'll say. The utilities are notified very early in the process that there's going to be a customer migration and where they're going to come from. And so they're able to plan. We really haven't seen very much pain in terms of customer rates or rate basing cost shifts from CCA adoption in New York. It's certainly still a concern in the room, so to speak, and I think that's always going to be the case, especially as CCA demand grows and the size of the programs and the program statewide grows, and in a smaller market like New Hampshire, there could be really significant sort of from a percentage perspective shifts with the adoption of CCA. So I can certainly understand the anxiety around it. We have not seen negative consequences in terms of customer rates or other system issues for IOUs as a result of CCA migration or adoption, I should say. But again, it is always sort of there. It always is kind of in the background.
Don?
Yeah, I think for us, the same anxiety with losing that load. It became also an equity issue over here in that, all these folks are coming over, leaving PG&E, for instance. So the customers that are staying with PG&E are now having to foot the bill of that stranded cost. So what the CPUC came up with, which is a power charge and difference adjustment, or PCIA, that's added on to the CCA bill to, in essence, keep everyone whole. But there's been a lot of contention over that. Lately, it's been off the radar because if you think about it, as power supply prices have gone through the roof, those stranded assets are now become more valuable. And so we've actually seen a zero or even negative PCI in the last couple of years. But that's only because the markets are so out of whack. So it's a problem that will come back for us. But it's certainly early on. There was a lot of volatility with that exit fee, if you will. It's got the right idea behind it. It's just the execution gets a little murky, but I agree with what I heard from the other panelists as well.
Okay. Well, the other thing we heard from your presentations was there seems to be a lot of movement towards integrating renewables and efficiencies into your programs. And so as you guys are moving those programs forward and helping your state reach their sustainability goals, what are some of the policy rules changes that each of you would like to see in your state to really create a glide path to unlock the full potential in your markets?
Yeah, so how much time do you have? No, but I think first and foremost, something that we've really been really worked on very hard for several years is what I spoke about earlier, which is what we might call opt-out community solar or default enrollment community solar, or including community solar subscriptions. So community solar is not electricity supply. It doesn't replace the retail supplier or those electrons being provided to the customer. It is an additive program in most markets. So they can work together quite nicely, and community solar subscriptions in most markets also come with guaranteed bill savings. So it's a really natural marriage with a CCA electricity supply, however that's being procured, and creates a guaranteed savings layer in the CCA offering, which is extremely powerful and of course supports local solar and the long-term resilience and system reliability of the grid. So for us, that's a home run all around. There's, it has been harder than it should be from a logical perspective to get that through on the policy side. So that's still number one for us. Also, utility transparency is a big policy issue for us. Utility price to compare is a black box in New York. You have a little bit more transparency in some other markets, but especially for us, it's a real challenge for all customers, especially CCAs trying to work in an environment where the utility price to compare is still the number one competitor, and we have very little visibility. So utility transparency on their costs and their rate making is another policy objective. And then, simply sort of stronger legislation for CCA authority more broadly. We've been working on that for a couple of years too, from a legislative capacity to just strengthening the overall CCA law in New York State.
For us, there are a number of things that come to mind, but I would say being able to expand our Cape and Vineyard electrification offering to more than just 100 customers. So really being able to use those energy efficiency dollars to fund the installation of solar was something that the Compact worked at for many years. We proposed CVEO to the Department of Public Utilities. This was, I think, the fourth time that it was proposed, that it was finally approved, and that was actually because of changes in legislation that allowed specifically for renewable energy to be funded with energy efficiency dollars. And in our view, programs like this that are really focusing on equity, so bringing electrification and renewables to customers that otherwise wouldn't be able to afford those upfront costs, is really important in our clean energy transition. And so being able to continue programs like that moving forward will be important.
All right, thank you. And Don?
Yeah, thanks. Agree with the other comments. I think over here specifically in California, the biggest issue right now is the resource adequacy program needs to get fixed. I've seen with the pandemic, we're still dealing with supply chain issues, getting new projects built. At the same time, there's been a reaction to some extreme weather events. Last summer, for instance, we came close to rolling blackouts. The CPUC, a lot of ways, overreacted in increasing the reserve margins for the IOUs, which took more RA out of the system for everyone else, and they increased their requirements on every load serving entity in some way. And then they've lowered the capacity factor, or the nameplate capacity or qualifying factor to wind and solar. And so those don't count as much towards RA as they used to. At the same time, they don't want fossil fuel plants, right? Even though we depend on fossil fuel for resource adequacy. So you got that tug of war. You want a green grid, but you also want to keep the lights on. So it's been a huge problem for us here. Because of the pricing is so out of whack right now and resource adequacy, it's really hurting expansion, or certainly it's a barrier to entry for forming the new CCA, and it absolutely needs to get fixed. It's a hard solution to come up with, but it's needed. So hopefully I answered your question. Thanks.
All right, thanks a lot, Don. Now I'd like to open it up to the audience for some questions. Way in the back with the green. Oh, that's you. Yes.
Hi, I'm Representative Wendy Thomas from Merrimack, and this is a question for the Joule fellow. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Glenn. Okay. In one of your slides, you said you have at least 800,000 customers. You said it was more sort of closer to 1 million. And then on the same slide, you said 99.5% of your customers save money. Let's talk about that 0.5 that does not save money. This was new information to me. I thought everyone would save money. Is there a typical type of customer that does not save money with a CPA?
And just quickly, so we could hear, the question boils down to essentially who's best served by these aggregations, and does everybody save money? And if they don't, who would not be a potential saver in this situation?
Yeah. So the typical CCA contract in New York, being a fairly a kind of typical deregulated market, has been a fully fixed contract rate. So say a 24-month contract where in each of those 24 months, the price remains precisely the same. We're moving away from that model, but that's been the typical standard offer for CCA programs, not just Joule programs, but all CCA programs in New York to date. So that means that if you can imagine a sort of straight line that cuts through, that's that fixed rate contract. And then this monthly variable utility price to compare. So it's which looks more like an EKG or a roller coaster, right? So in some months, those utility rates will be higher than CCA rates, and in some months they'll be lower. So savings are not guaranteed, at least in that construct, in that type of market. Now we've had, like I said, we've had very strong performance and the ability to source competitively in such a way at strategic times that we have been able to capture savings for almost all of our customers. That 0.5 is not so much a type of customer, but a specific contract in one municipality that did not save. So that's really what represents that number.
All right, thank you, Glenn. In the green, over there.
I just wanted to check in and see if any of you have successfully integrated community solar into your offer, into your power that you are aggregating through proactive activity in specific towns in your territory.
The question is, have you successfully integrated community solar into your programs?
Yes, so we have. So we've piloted a program which launched in 2021 in upstate New York, which worked with about 35 megawatts of community solar across a number of different project developers in the area, all within about 100 miles of the communities themselves. And that was offered to, I think, about 3,500 or 4,000 customers as part of the default offering for those communities. Right, so in addition to fixed rate electricity, 100% fixed rate electricity supply, 100% renewable, they were also offered a community solar subscription. They could take it or opt out of that as well, right? They could opt out of electricity supply only, community solar only, or both, or stay in all. So they had each of those choices, or have each of those choices, and that is providing a guaranteed savings of up to 10% on their electricity bills annually.
And Don, have you integrated any community solar in California?
Some CCAs have. I have not. It's something on our radar in the next year or two. But yes, it is not as been as active as you might think. But yeah, there are one or two CCAs that do have a program on that.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Renee Allen, Exeter Energy Committee. We were in wave 1 of the CPCNH deployment for community power, which is a nonprofit. And I have a question about the reserve fund. I was under the, we think the reserve fund is a great thing and definitely a plus, but I have heard that there are some people who consider it a negative. Is there anybody that could speak to that?
That'd probably be most applicable to Don in the California market. The question was about the reserve funds for risk management. And given the way that you contract for your hedging, your laddering, everything else, could you speak to the reserve fund and what impacts that might have in terms of your planning and your implementation?
Yeah, so thanks for that. So it's the reserve fund really becomes our insurance policy, if you will. There's really you can for instance, you can hedge all you like, but at some point you're going to get some shocks to your system. We saw it not this past summer, but the summer before, where we had 105-degree heat for about 8 days in a row. Prices were going through the roof, and that reserve fund becomes really your insurance policy to be able to absorb the shock and not have to just jump out there and raise rates because something like that happens. So up for us, it becomes the rate stability fund, if you will. It's also for the rating agencies. They are looking for that 120 to 160 day expense coverage days before they're going to give you a good rating. And it's not something that we build up just to have a reserve fund. It's really out there for as our insurance policy. There's really no other way to hedge against those weather shocks that are going to hit your system. So super important to develop that. And if you have a financial policy in place where board members have to take action if you fall below a certain coverage days, it really helps those conversations to keep you safe. So hopefully I answered your question.
Yes, thank you. And then so for Massachusetts and the Joule program in New York, for instance, you work through Nextera. So Nextera handles kind of the financial risk in that scenario?
Yeah. We have an all requirements power supply contract with Nextera. So they're really the ones that are responsible for supplying that energy. The costs do get passed on to our customers, but we do have a hedging strategy that hopefully does generally cover that risk. We don't have any kind of reserve requirement in Massachusetts, though.
Glenn?
Yeah, we're sort of en route from A to B. So to date, our contracts have run through the retailer, providing firm full requirements, power supply, and the RECs. And now we are moving to a model that is more managed on the client and municipal, or the Joule and municipality side, where there will be a reserve fund.
Okay. Thank you. Great question. Yes. Nope. Got a microphone right there for you.
John Tabor from the Portsmouth Energy Committee. Just to follow up on the community solar, did I hear you say that's opt out? And can you give some color on the amount of savings that people are seeing?
Yeah, it's opt out. So it was included as part of the default offering. Like I said, it is the community solar is offered as a default offering, just as electricity supply is, but they are sort of distinct in the sense that the customer can select among us. So you don't have to take the community solar. It's guaranteed savings. So I don't know why you wouldn't, but certainly those customers that already have net metering, for instance, rooftop net metering, or their own community solar subscription that they're perfectly happy with, or they just have some vendetta against solar power and don't like saving money, they can certainly opt out. But they're saving, like I said, it's roughly 10% off customer bills, so it ends up being about $100 for the sort of average customer annually.
Okay, great. We're a little over on time, so just everybody be mindful of that. Maybe take a couple more questions. It's about 11:48. So yes, in the black.
Nora Hanka from NADMAC Sustainability Hub. Question for Mariel and Glenn. Wondering if you can give us an idea of the percent of customers that are staying with the utility, the opt-outs.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we serve about 75% of the customers in our service territory. that 25% that isn't with us could be with the utility. They also could be with other competitive retail suppliers who are, for-profit suppliers.
Yeah, we're right in that range too. I think Don had a slide that said 85%. Mariel said 75. Most of our programs are right in that range of about 15 to 20% opt-out rates. Yeah.
I'm sorry, follow up from Mariel. So I was interested to know the percent who are opting out, because I know some people already have alternative supply. Another reason not to, they're not on default retail service. So of those who are on default retail service with utility, what percent opted out for on the Cape?
I guess I'm not sure I totally understand the question. We launched our power supply product in 2000, so all those customers were automatically enrolled then. So we've had opt-outs over the years, and then customers are automatically enrolled when they open a new account, and a small percentage opt-out.
I'm just curious to follow up on that real quick. Do your programs mostly cater to the residential small commercial? And then if so, what happens to the large commercial users? Do they tend to opt into your program, opt out? How does that work?
Most of our customers, and if you think about the Cape, most of the customers on the Cape are residential or small commercial. Anyway, we do have a commercial industrial rate, but we have very few customers that are on that. We find that generally those customers are signing longer term contracts with a retail supplier.
Yeah, so in New York, the residential and the small commercial, non-demand commercial, I should say, are the only opt-out eligible customers. So those are the ones that get automatic enrollment. There is an opportunity for opt-in for larger commercial, but typically our rates don't do better for them than their own. Yeah.
All right. Yes, in the front row.
Thank you. Peter Somsich, Portsmouth Energy Advisory Committee. I don't want to shed too many tears for the shareholder-owned regulated utilities. However, we just heard a couple times mention of the fact that they need to be our partners with this whole enterprise. Here in New Hampshire, as you probably know, we have, I think, 4 utilities. We have 3 regulated ones, and we have the New Hampshire Co-op. And the New Hampshire Co-op, unlike the other utilities, is not regulated, but they also provide the poles and the wires. So they're an integrated utility that does everything. Now, when you look at the regulated utilities who are now who have to provide the transmission and distribution network, but maybe are struggling profitability-wise, is there some point where there needs to be some kind of merger of minds here with the utilities that provide the infrastructure and us who are providing alternative power and alternative services? Otherwise, we probably couldn't exist without the other.
Don, did you hear the question, Don?
I got part of it. If you don't mind, just giving me repeating.
So I guess at some point, to sum it up, the two parties are kind of symbiotic. They have to coexist. And how does that play into the long-term relationship between these CCAs and the utilities?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So they are our partner, and I think long-term, and I'm speaking specifically for San Diego Gas and Electric and PG&E. I'm not sure about SoCal Edison in this case, but I think long-term, San Diego Gas and Electric, for instance, I think is looking to get out of the generation business. I think PG&E is not that far away. They don't really make money on the generation side of the bill. They make their return on equity on the transmission distribution side of it. And so if, for instance, San Francisco is wanting to purchase the T&D system from PG&E, they've got $2 billion in cash waiting to make a deal happen, and PG&E won't return the phone calls because that's where they make their money. So I think long term that relationship is going to be, we're going to be the generation side of it, CCAs, and the IOUs are going to get out of that side of the business and focus just on T&D, but time will tell.
All right, thank you. So final question, yes.
So in Cape Cod, you have like 21 towns working with you, and
California, you have all that sun coming in all the time. Do you all ever gonna sort of facilitate distributed power, and or virtual power like they're talking about? You seem to have the sort of gravitas, and you've worked with all these towns to make sure that there is more solar and wind products and local renewable products. Are you ever going to take that, or are you always just going to be in the business selling RECs?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. In terms of like the VPP side of things, we are running that Connected Solutions program, which is a demand response program. But we do need to work very closely with the utility in running programs like virtual power plants, because they're the ones that are essentially responsible for actually making sure that the power is getting delivered across the lines. We're generally just supplying generation. And so that relationship with the utility is really important, because we need to essentially be responding to signals from them. And so we need to work closely with them and then with our customers as kind of a middleman there. And so I think it's definitely something that we're interested in expanding. There's currently an electric sector modernization plan that the utilities will be filing with the Department of Public Utilities. But again, that's something that the utilities are filing. We're going to be participating in that process and would love to have a place or a role to play in operating some of that, especially like demand reduction, as opposed to building new infrastructure to meet all of the load increases. But it's something that we're going to have to kind of see how that regulatory process goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's where we have to go. The municipalities have the sort of authority that's pretty rare for, that not many entities have that type of authority. To municipalize their power if they really want to, which is a big hammer, but also, on some of that local infrastructure. And interconnection problems are really the number one challenge to DER integration, right? So how do you sort of leverage that municipal authority to, to accelerate models for financing substation and feeder upgrades that are necessary to increase the capacity of DER within a local system by sort of drawing that municipal circle around, right, and saying we have authority here. We could do CCA, we can municipalize if we really wanted to, and buy the franchise from the IOU if we really wanted to go through that 5-year process and all that legal. And we have the opportunity maybe to influence, as Mariel is saying as well, to influence, how those upgrades are financed and to what end and who benefits and what sorts of resources go on that loop that might otherwise not have been able to pencil or to get interconnection. So, I think that's a critical question for CCAs over the next 10 years, maybe the critical question.
Don, did you hear the question about DER integration through CCAs, moving away from just buying renewable energy credits? Looked like you guys were doing about 20 or 30% via PPAs and so on and so forth. So,
yeah, not much to add from the other comments from folks, but I do look at the 40,000 NEM customers. None of them really have a battery, and I think if we can find a way to make this economical to get a battery on those systems, it would really help with our resource adequacy. So that's kind of a partnership I see down the road to do a better job of utilizing those NEMs. But the other comments were spot on. Thank you.
All right, great. Well, I just wanted to say thank you to our panelists today, and thank you for the audience participation. Don, Mariel, and Glenn, thank you for coming today. And that'll conclude our presentation for this afternoon. So thank you very much for coming.